Hello, I'm Jeremy, and welcome to another episode of Jeremy U's Reviews, where mistreated movies get a second chance. Today we'll be doing something a little bit different as we take a look at 3 of Brendan Fraser's less well-acclaimed movies in a little segment I like to call Frasermania. Brendan Fraser. Not only has the dude been in some awesome movies like George of the Jungle, Encino Man, and Blast from the Past, but he has just has such a likable and wholesome vibe that really makes him an enjoyable actor. And since this is my 40th episode and my first video since moving back into my dorm, I thought I'd do something special by reviewing not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3 Brendan Fraser movies. Monkeybone, Dudley Do-Right, and Looney Tunes Back in Action. We have a lot to get through, so let's get started. This is Frasermania.
Swimming by the sandy shore, dancing up among the waves. Dolphin, dolphin, I adore everything you are. You're so much...
So here's how this is going to work. This is going to be like my mini reviews videos where I briefly review each movie, but I'll also make points to defend it and summarize the story like I do in the regular series. So without further ado, let's start with the one that a lot of people requested, Monkeybone. Monkeybone is about Stuart Miley, get it? Played by Fraser, who is a cartoonist that created the titular Monkeybone, voiced by John Turturro, who is an obnoxious anthropomorphic monkey. Miley plans on proposing to his girlfriend, Julie McElroy, played by Bridget Fonda, but before he can, a car crash results in Miley getting into a coma and arriving at downtown. Like, as in downtown, like with a space between down and town. A world full of crazy mythical creatures. While there, he meets Monkeybone, and the two discover people can leave downtown if they get an exit pass. But after getting one from Death, played by Whoopi Goldberg, Monkeybone betrays Miley, takes his exit pass, and takes over his body. So Miley is stuck in downtown, trying to get his body back and preventing Monkeybone from instilling the world with nightmares. While I do like Monkeybone, I will admit that it is a massive mixed bag. There are some things that are legit good and some things that slightly drag it down. But let's start with the good. First off, the creativity. The world of downtown is an insanely cool and creative location. Monkeybone was directed by stop-motion legend Henry Selick, and it absolutely shows. Every inch of downtown has Selick's creative fingerprints all over it, from surreal locations to creepy and weird creatures to downright terrifying nightmare sequences. It's an absolute visual marvel that really makes Monkeybone worth seeing. Characters are also pretty solid. While Stu Miley is nowhere near Brendan Fraser's best character, he's still a likable enough guy, given a solid performance from Brendan Fraser. When Nostalgia Critic reviewed Monkeybone, he pointed out how Brendan didn't fit the weird, geeky vibe that Miley was supposed to have. And on the one hand, he's not exactly wrong, as Brendan is a very clean-cut kind of guy, but on the other hand, Fraser still gives a solid performance. His awkward, nervous energy makes Miley an enjoyable contrast to the insanity going on around him, and his interactions with the other characters, both in the regular world and in downtown, are pretty enjoyable. The only problem with Miley's character is that once he gets to downtown, he only cares about his girlfriend, Julie. Like, all of his motivations are tied to her. This makes him feel kind of one note, thus making me feel less invested in his journey. But aside from that, Stu Miley is an overall solid character. And the other characters are great too. Julie is a decent girlfriend character who has good chemistry with Miley. Dave Foley does a good job as Fraser's agent Herb, bringing his comedic chops to the sleazy character. Whoopi Goldberg is surprisingly good as Death. Hypnos is a decent villain I wish had a little bit more of a presence in the story. And then we have the titular Monkeybone. I am extremely mixed on this character. On the one hand, Monkeybone, the character, has some pretty funny moments and adds to the absurdist charm of the film. His interactions with Miley and the other characters are entertaining. John Turturro does a solid job voicing him, his design is cool, he's well animated, and the scenes of him in Miley's body are legit really funny. You can tell that Brendan had a lot of fun playing a live-action cartoon character, and he really makes you feel like he's possessed by Monkeybone. But on the other hand, Monkeybone as a character is kind of generic. While I do love intentionally obnoxious and mischievous comic relief characters like Beetlejuice, Drop Dead Fred, and Maurice from Little Monsters, there's a likable and unique personality to them that makes them stick out from other characters in a similar vein. But Monkeybone doesn't have any depth to him. He begins and ends with the obnoxious jokes he makes, and there's nothing that separates Monkeybone from the characters I just mentioned. Again, not a bad character, but one that I wished had a little bit more personality. As for the humor, it's pretty funny. While not the funniest film I've ever seen, Monkeybone has some solidly funny moments, from funny lines to the absurdism of downtown to the ridiculousness of Monkeybone possessing Stu. It's pretty solid comedy that enhances the film and makes it a fun watch, although the subplot where Dave sees nightmare clothes and gets naked was weird, to say the least. This brings us into the main issues I have with Monkeybone, the film, not the character. I already brought up Miley feeling one note, but there are two other issues I haven't mentioned yet. Miley's sister and the tone. Miley's sister Kimmy is one of the most pointless movie characters I've ever seen. Not only does she never directly interact with her brother throughout the film, but she only exists to facilitate a time limit. See, when Stu first goes into downtown, there's no real reason for him to get back into the real world. Sure, he wants to get back to Julie, but ignoring the exit pass issue, Stu is still able to go back as long as he's being taken care of. But Kimmy introduces this insane pact she made with Stu when they were children that allows the doctor to pull the plug before Stu can be saved. Ignoring how incredibly stupid, contrived, and dark, even for this movie that is, after Monkeybone wakes up as Stu, Kimmy is never in the movie again. She just waltzed in and said, "Here's an artificial ticking time bomb to get Stu into the real world. Okay, bye." A pointless character that, despite being the sister of the main character, adds virtually nothing. As for the tone, this movie is all over the place tone-wise. Unlike Beetlejuice, which knew how to balance horror and comedy in a way that didn't seem jarring, Monkeybone feels like it switches between being light and goofy, weird and trippy, adult and risque, and dark and horrifying, without ever really finding a proper balance. It makes the film feel really uneven, and I think with some retooling it could have worked. But aside from that, Monkeybone is a really good film. It's far from perfect, but it's very creative, surreal, fun, and unique. I definitely get why so many people don't vibe with this film, and I myself have some issues with it, but overall, Monkeybone is a decent, enjoyably surreal flick I recommend checking out. On to Dudley Do-Right. Based on the Jay Ward cartoon of the same name, Dudley Do-Right follows its title character, once again played by Fraser, a Canadian Mountie who upholds justice and foils the plans of the evil Snidely Whiplash, played by Alfred Molina. Yes, the same Alfred Molina that was in Spider-Man 2 and Raiders of the Lost Ark. One day, Inspector Fenwick's daughter, Nell Fenwick, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, returns from her world tour, and her and Dudley get reacquainted. Meanwhile, Snidely helps a poor prospector named Kim J. Darling, played by Eric Idle, find gold, resulting in Snidely's popularity increasing, allowing him to take control of the town and kidnap Nell. Once Dudley finds out about this, he tries to stop Whiplash, but Inspector Fenwick, who's on good terms with Snidely, finds out and fires Do-Right. So it's up to Dudley to stop Snidely and his crew, save the town, and get his girl back. Before I talk about my feelings on the Dudley Do-Right movie, I should probably establish my thoughts on the cartoon it was based on. I love it. Not only does Dudley Do-Right, the cartoon, have the charming animation and snappy, clever writing of the original Rocky and Bullwinkle show, but it's also a pretty fun parody of stereotypical good guy versus bad guy properties. And while the Dudley Do-Right movie is nowhere near as good as the cartoon it was based on, it's still a pretty fun movie in its own right. Let's start with the title character. While Brendan Fraser was clearly picked to play Do-Right because of his role in George of the Jungle, which the trailer for the film jokes about, Fraser still does a good job. Fraser's Do-Right is a very goofy, naive, and silly character, yet is still a solid and enjoyable protagonist who always does right, even if it's a detriment to others. Fraser gives an ordinarily simple character a lot of charm and likability, adding to the humor, both physical and verbal, and manages to make the character different from the original Do-Right, yet still enjoyable in his own right. He's not a terribly complex character, but Do-Right is a pretty fun, effective main character who has a lot of enjoyable moments and is given a great performance. But every great hero needs a good foe, and Snidely Whiplash delivers. The movie's version of Snidely Whiplash is such an awesome character, thanks in part to a phenomenal performance from Alfred Molina. While he doesn't top Hans Conried, the original voice actor for Snidely Whiplash, Molina does a good job adding his own spin on the character, while still capturing his essence. Molina's Whiplash is both snarky and sarcastic, and cartoony and over the top, and his banter with Do-Right and his henchmen is legit hilarious. It's honestly worth seeing just for Molina's awesome performance alone. As for Nell, she's okay. Sarah Jessica Parker does a fine job, but she's overall just a basic love interest character. Which is kind of the point, so I'm not too mad. And then we have the humor. This is going to sound weird, but Dudley Do-Right reminds me a lot of Gremlins 2: The New Batch. Why? Well, because like that film, Dudley Do-Right is a film that knows it has no reason to exist. So it just has fun with itself. In addition to standard slapstick shenanigans, there's a ton of ridiculously absurd humor that you wouldn't think would be in a film like this. For example, when Snidely helps Kim find gold, we get a game show parody that shows Eric Idle winning all this gold. And in order to get Do-Right off his trail, Snidely convinces him that there are vampires in the woods. Vampires. It's that kind of ridiculous humor that makes Dudley Do-Right a fun film to watch. And like the Boris and Natasha movie, the film has a narrator which captures the same charm as the original Rocky and Bullwinkle narrator. Overall, Dudley Do-Right is a very simple film, but a very fun one. While Monkeybone, despite being good, has had no idea what it wanted to be, Dudley Do-Right knows exactly what it wants to be. A simple, fun, and goofy film that the whole family can enjoy. The acting is great, the comedy is hilarious, the characters are fun, and it perfectly captures the spirit of the awesome original cartoon. If you're looking for a film for family night or want something light and fun to watch, give Dudley Do-Right a look. It may not be perfect, but my god is it fun. Moving on to the final film I'm going to be talking about in this video, and my personal favorite of the three, Looney Tunes Back in Action. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Looney Tunes Back in Action takes place in a world where cartoon characters are real actors instead of fictional characters. After demanding his own cartoon, Daffy Duck is fired by Kate Houghton, played by Jenna Elfman, the vice president of comedy. But in the process of trying to escort Daffy off the property, security guard DJ Drake, played by Fraser, causes the water tower to be demolished, resulting in him getting fired. Afterwards, Daffy follows Drake home, and the two receive a message from Drake's father, secret agent Damian Drake, leading to the two heading for Vegas. Meanwhile, it turns out Bugs Bunny's routine doesn't really work without Daffy, so Bugs and Kate Houghton go to find Daffy. There's a lot more to the plot, but those are the broad strokes. Looney Tunes Back in Action is everything a live-action Looney Tunes movie should be. It's campy, it's goofy, it stays true to the source material, and manages to combine live action and animation effectively. Let's start with the animation. The way they integrate the cartoon characters into the real world is absolutely fantastic. Unlike Smurfs and Alvin and the Chipmunks, which turn their title characters into 3D abominations, Back in Action lets the toons keep their two-dimensional form, and they're integrated into the film so seamlessly that they never feel out of place. They genuinely feel like they're in that location. This makes the film feel more immersive and worth investing in, as opposed to a hollow experience where half the cast isn't actually there. And on top of that, it's freaking hilarious. The writing on this film is legit really good, balancing campy cartoonishness with snappy and clever dialogue, creating a unique and yet recognizable and enjoyable type of humor. The film's comedy maintains cleverness throughout and never needs to resort to juvenile or gross humor. The characters are also awesome. Let's start with DJ Drake. Now, even though I'm starting off with Drake, he's not really the main character of the story. Don't get me wrong, Drake definitely plays an important role in the story, but unlike the last two movies in this video, which had definitive main characters, LTBA doesn't really have a main character, as Bugs, Drake, Hofton, and Daffy all have equal weight in the story. I don't mind this, as it makes the film feel unique and is a decent way to execute the story. But since this video is about Brendan Fraser, we're starting off with his character. Drake is alright. Like Stu Miley, he's definitely not Brendan's best character, but he's an alright straight man to the weirdness that's going on around him. His interactions with Daffy are pretty funny, and the way he engages with the story is legit interesting. It's fun to see Brendan engage with these cartoony antics, and he really makes the role his own. Decent character all around. As for the toons, they are fantastic. Bugs and Daffy are perfected to a T in this movie. I already mentioned how great they look, retaining their original 2D form with a slight updated sheen, but they also perfectly match their original characters. Daffy is narcissistic, but never to an irritating or unlikable degree, and you do sympathize with him a bit, as he is getting the short end of the stick in terms of being treated by the company he works for. And his crazy, hyperactive demeanor makes him a fun character to play off the others, whether it's his contrasting off DJ Drake's serious demeanor, or having chemistry with Bugs so good that some people consider them boyfriends in this movie. An overall, really enjoyable take on Daffy Duck. And as for Bugs, he also retains his natural, laid-back charisma, really playing into his strengths. Like Daffy, Bugs interacting off characters like Kate is pretty fun to see, and he has some really funny moments. Both Bugs and Daffy are absolutely fantastic in this movie, retaining both their physicality and personality, and having a ton of fun moments that makes a good film even better. Moving on, we have Kate Hofton. Kate is an alright character. While she's not insanely memorable, she does serve her role in the story well. Jenna Elfman does a solid job in the role, and like with Drake, it's fun to see her bounce off these crazy cartoon characters. She has some pretty enjoyable moments, but isn't really a character that there's a lot to say about. She's perfectly alright, nothing more, nothing less. Rounding out the main cast, we have our villain, Mr. Chairman. While not a top 10 of all time villain, Mr. Chairman is a perfect villain for the kind of film Back in Action is trying to be. Steve Martin gives an enjoyably campy performance that fits the film beautifully and really makes the character enjoyable. He contrasts off the other characters well, and is a perfect balance of funny and threatening, making his presence known as a threat, yet still having a fun and enjoyable edge. Great villain for a great film. Moving on to the creativity. Back in Action has a very creative flair that makes it stand out from similar ilk. One great example is a scene where Elmer Fudd, who's evil in this movie, chases Bugs and Daffy through a series of different paintings, and the cartoon trio transforms into a bunch of different artistic mediums. That's clever and fun on its own, but the scene is even better when Elmer is still in a pointillism style, and since pointillism is a bunch of dots stuck together to form an image, Bugs uses a fan to blow away all the dots and detach Fudd's shape. That's an insanely creative and clever and also educational way to take out Elmer Fudd. And there are other great examples of creativity as well. The way each toon is integrated into the movie is very clever and fits their character. And the meta humor is the perfect balance of clever and subtle. I especially like the scene where Shaggy and Scooby get upset at Matthew Lillard. That scene was pretty funny. Overall, there's a lot of creative elements that make Back in Action positively stick out and make the film fun to watch. Finally, let's talk about how Back in Action pairs with its more famous cousin, Space Jam. It's a million times better. Now don't get me wrong, Space Jam isn't bad. For what it is, it's a perfectly serviceable, decent nostalgia trip. But it's not a Looney Tunes movie. It's a basketball movie with the Looney Tunes in it. Back in Action, on the other hand, is a Looney Tunes movie. Unlike Space Jam, where you could replace the Looney Tunes with any other group of cartoon characters and nothing would change, Back in Action is a film that is 100% tied around the Looney Tunes. There are numerous instances where the film utilizes Looney Tunes-esque aspects in a way that feels unique to the film. Like Daffy and Bugs' dynamic and using Taz like an attack dog, which Space Jam just doesn't do. This is what makes Looney Tunes Back in Action such a great film. It's a movie that fully embraces its loony and campy atmosphere as opposed to something like Space Jam, which tries to cover it up with basketball and product placement, or the deluge of CGI cartoon adaptations which try to dull it down to its most basic edgeless form, like ABC Gum. Again, Space Jam isn't bad, but in terms of being a Looney Tunes film, Back in Action just does it better. Looney Tunes Back in Action is an underrated treasure. Is it the best movie ever made? Heck no. But it's a film that was incredibly disrespected and ignored. The animation is great, the comedy is fun, the characters are enjoyable, and it perfectly captures the spirit of the Looney Tunes while still being its own thing. If you're a Looney Tunes fan or love goofy and silly meta comedies, Back in Action should tickle your fancy. An underrated and awesome send-off to the Looney Tunes' theatrical run. At least until Space Jam: A New Legacy, which I haven't seen. And with that, Frasermania comes to a close. So what are your thoughts on these films? What's your favorite Brendan Fraser film? Are you glad for his comeback? Comment below, and tune in next time when I list my top 10 most underrated movies. See you then!